sciences. He was, but he felt he was unwelcome in the church. I'm using church in a broad sense. Uh, but then in, when he was about 30, he got a job in Caracas, Venezuela, working for an oil company as a geologist. Uh, but here, the Presbyterian missionaries, who are probably the largest Protestant missionary group in Venezuela, that he could be a good Christian and also believe in evolution. So that got him interested in the church only to the point of view of singing in the choir, of the musical aspects of it, going out and with the board of deacons, outreach to the poor neighborhoods, not preaching the gospel, but more just trying to help people. He became very involved with the YMCA and building, literally putting up a YMCA camp that was oriented toward the inner city poor of Caracas. Uh, he he was recognized by the YMCA for this his efforts in helping out with building these cabins at the Y camp. Uh, he he continued this sort of kind of commitment well into his 80s, delivering Meals on Wheels and chairing the Older Americans Council in Macon, Georgia, which reached out primarily to African Americans. This is back in the 1960s, 1970s, probably more 1970s, 1980s. Okay, what was our lifestyle in Caracas? I would say we led a fairly simple life. My parents were not part of the country club or the cocktail sets. Dad took care of all repairs in the house. He wouldn't let anybody come in and fix anything. But he did let us, by the time we got to be 10 or 12, to help out with mowing the grass. No electric mowers, manual lawnmowers, and it was not a big lawn. We rarely traveled to ocean beaches. Unlike many Americans, though, in Caracas, both of my parents spoke Spanish very well, and we moved from one rental property to another about every 2 years. We didn't have a telephone, except for 2 years in a rental house, because it took 2 years to have a phone, get a phone, when you put your name on the list. So we were deprived, communications deprived. We were communities there that were over 80% were English speakers. Others, where we tend to live, was a lot less than that. And to put in perspective, in the 1950s, there were over 1,000 Americans in Caracas, Venezuela, because of oil companies and other related industries where they attracted people from, need to attract people. We went in Caracas, we went to the American Church, now called the United Christian Church, almost every Sunday. Dad sang in the choir, and Mother taught Sunday school and took care of the church library. She had worked the Library of Congress here for 10 years before getting married. And that was the only English-speaking church, except for one small Anglican church, and further away from our home in the center of Caracas. And my mother would, from time to time, go there because she really appreciated all the ritualistic aspects of the Anglican/Episcopal Church. But it was not really as convenient. They didn't have as much of a Sunday school. We said prayers with my mother at bedtime and read from the Bible at Christmas and Easter. My brother and I do not remember ever talking about the Bible with our father. It was strictly with our mother. Through elementary school, I went to schools with all instruction in Spanish, with a mix of students representing at least 12 nationalities. Actually, it was a school founded by the Presbyterian missionaries, late 19th century. We had weekly Bible class. In third grade, we read the Bible in Spanish. Several of us claimed to have read the entire Spanish Bible by the end of the school year. In retrospect, we probably just skimmed the first page of each book of the Bible. I still have that Bible right here, third grade Spanish Bible we had, or as they say in Spanish, La Santa Biblia, Antiguo y Nuevo Testamento, Old and New Testament. Let's see. For junior high, I went to school with Instruction English, a school founded with significant support from all the oil companies, knowing that such a school would help attract Americans with no or very limited exposure to Spanish. Where does Quakerism come in? In 8th grade, my parents decided it would be best for me to come up to the U.S. for boarding school. My English skills were slightly below grade and everything else above grade level. Mother contacted a college classmate who strongly recommended the George School, a Quaker school north of Philadelphia. Her husband had been serving as a New York Yearly Meeting representative on the George School board. My parents were most impressed. And so I entered George School as a 9th grader. I believe the first one from Caracas. And I think my mother must have done a great sales job on George School, because within the next 3 years, 8 more kids from Caracas came up to George School, to include the 2 sons of the pastor of the interdenominational Protestant church there in Caracas. Guess who the daughter of my mother's classmate was?
Huh.
My lovely wife of 59 years, Janet. George School was significant in furthering my spiritual journey. I felt more comfortable with how Quakers dealt with God, because they're much less doctrinaire. Together with my earlier religious experience, I came to feel comfortable with the value of the Bible as a guide to life without getting bogged down by a literal interpretation of the Bible. I participated in weekend work camps in Philadelphia and chaired the small community chess committee my senior year. Janet and I were at George School at the same time, but we never dated in high school or in college. That came later. My incident my senior year at George School, my grandfather died, and he was the only one of my 4 grandparents that I ever knew. All of them, the other ones had died by the time before I was 2 years old. I came to his open casket funeral in D.C. What did it mean for a grandfather to go to heaven? If heaven represented the favorable memories of him, what would have been the case if I did not have favorable memories of him? Would he not be in heaven? I still go back to the thoughts that those kind of things running through my mind from my senior year at George School. After graduating from George School, I struggled with registering. Should I register for as a conscientious objector, or should I go through ROTC? And after a lot of thinking, I decided to go and get onto ROTC. And now that we're Quakers, we're now, since the 1920s, going more for the idea of let's be for peace and shifting away from the idea against war. Some of you may say, well, that's all one and the same, but I saw it that the Department of Defense, not the Department of War, not the War Department, could work toward the end work together with conscientious objector to bring a world of peace. And so, and I was fortunate that when I finished ROTC and was commissioned as a lieutenant for 2 years of active duties, I was had to go to artillery basic training, and 95% of the young men in that group went on to Vietnam. I was part of the 5% that didn't, and probably the Army was smart not to have sent me to Vietnam. I received the lowest score in marksmanship at officer base. Never fired, because I never fired a rifle or pistol before going to officer basic training. I did not regularly attend church or meeting in college, but I did participate in discussion groups at the campus of Episcopal Church. I remember reading, can't tell you I remember a lot, is Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. So that I was thinking about it, but not in great depth. Each other better in Atlanta when I went to graduate school, and Janet got a job as a school psychologist there. And we, from time to time, we made it to Atlanta Friends meeting and were warmly greeted for dinner by Lauren and Beth Garretson and their very young daughter, Brooke. I felt very comfortable marrying under the care of Westbury Friends meeting in New York. Janet's paternal ancestors had been involved with the meeting for over some 300 years. When I joined Sandy Spring Friends meeting in the late 1980s, I thought this would be sufficient impetus for Janet to transfer her membership from Westbury to Sandy Spring. That is yet to happen. She's still a sojourner. Strong family feelings are hard to break. When we moved to Maryland in 1967, we visited various churches and Friends meetings. Some 5 or 6 years later, with the young family, we started coming to meeting here at Sandy Spring. Our 3 kids, Kathy, Jenny, and Dan, grew up in the meeting, attending First Day School and participating in meeting activities. Dan, when he was about 7, surprised us when he stood up in a meeting for worship with a clear and loving message. One of his children has followed in his footsteps. Our guidance to our 3 kids when they went off to college was to explore different faiths and see which best supported their spiritual journey. Our 2 youngest wanted our oldest, wanted a more Bible-focused faith, and became active in Young Life, and married Stephen, who had been raised in Colombia, South America, where his parents were involved with Wycliffe Bible translators. As a side note, Stephen's paternal grandmother and her aunt had been Quaker missionaries in Jamaica, and Stephen's dad had been born in Jamaica. At Sandy Spring First Day School, Kathy was, our oldest, was most inspired by Takeo Nishioka, felt that he really got into the Bible, and she learned a lot from Takeo when he was her First Day School teacher. It's interesting to note that my next younger brother, an artist now deceased, became involved with Friends in CeeLo, North Carolina for about 50 years and was very involved with Camp CeeLo and with the Arthur Morgan School. Another side note about our daughter Jenny, most of her friends in high school, late 1980s, were foreign and or not brought up in a Christian tradition. Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, Sikh, Jainism. Jenny felt that her friends had more glamorous and distinctive traditions. After more than 35 years, she keeps up with these friends, and they asked if they could come over to see a, quote, normal Christmas celebration, a huge success, and asked us to do it again in future years. My spiritual journey has involved trying to help others or support organizations that do. I retired federal government at age 60, and with the expectation that I could reach out to others to more direct manner. And so I'd been on the board of FCNL and of Sandy Spring Friends School. I ended up focusing on outreach to Hispanics in some fashion. About 20 years ago, I became involved with Quaker Bolivia Link, associated with Friends and Bolivia, the poorest country in the Americas after Haiti. And I've traveled to Bolivia 3 times in conjunction with this, and ended up serving as treasurer of the organization and then later as clerk of the board. Been involved with the Board of Elections for the city of Rockville, particular focus on making sure that election materials can be clearly understood by eligible Hispanic voters with limited skills. And I've also volunteered in similar reasoning with the AARP tax aid for 10 years and working with those with limited, with Spanish speakers with limited English proficiency. I have come to accept the Bible, primarily New Testament, as a great source of inspiration. Find Jesus' teachings are most instructive. Did Jesus have an immaculate birth, or did he rise from the dead after the crucifixion? I readily accept this in a figurative sense, but struggle with fully accepting it in a literal sense. His birth was very special, and his messages are very relevant to us today. I need to direct my spiritual journey going forward, I think, more to trying to understand it and the meaning of religious texts. Let's see. I believe in the worth and dignity of all people, even if they think differently than I do. Sometimes this can be a real challenge when I perceive that people are challenging the dignity of all people. I would be glad to answer any questions you may have. And I see another granddaughter, 8-year-old, turned 8 years old on Friday. Any questions, comments? Oh, Max, the oldest of the questions, comments? Yes.
I've been here for 25 years, and I've watched you and Janet, and I've learned a lot. I remember you did the Circle of Life way back then.
Yeah.
But anyway, it is thrilling to be here and watch your children and your grandchildren. I love your grandchildren. So it's just very, very special. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Did you say why your family chose Caracas? If you did, I missed it.
Well, the reason my dad was a geologist, and oil companies were looking for geologists. And when my dad first went down there in December 1935, he was out doing exploration, so oil exploration, going out into the boonies, often on traveling by mules and what have you, studying aerial photographs and all that. Where could there oil be? And that's where he already knew French and some German, but it forced him to learn Spanish because he was in the boonies, and you can't expect people in very rural areas to know Spanish, so that's how he learned Spanish. My mother was born in Mexico of American parents and grew up when she went to college, she majored in Spanish, and at the Library of Congress, she specialized in the Hispanic collections there. And she was on loan to the Venezuelan, the National Library of Venezuela, to help them come up to date with the modern techniques. And she is the only single American woman in Caracas in 1939. That's where she met my dad. Yes, Gary.
Graham, it sounds like you kept up your Spanish very well, and your activity in Bolivia, I wasn't aware of that.
Yeah.
Have you had much experience knowing many or any Latino Quakers or friends?
Not too much. I went to, in Mexico, Guatemala, I went to FWC, Friends World Committee on Consultation, had a section of the Americas there, and that's actually where I found out about a Quaker Bolivia link, and so that was before I went down to Bolivia. Uh, Not too much. There are not very many countries. Bolivia probably has the largest uh, Quaker population of any uh, country in the Americas. I mean, beyond the Spanish-speaking America, with probably about 35,000 Quakers there, which is certainly behind, much lower than Kenya or the United States, but there are uh, Quakers there. So I've had a little bit exposure, but not as much as one might think I may have had by now.
Well, I'm not surprised because our Quaker form of worship and religion is so different than the traditional, what's primarily Catholic.
Well, and the other challenge is that most Quakers, the Quakers, you had Quakers from the Northwest are the ones that came to Latin America, Guatemala, Bolivia, and they are, of course, are much more evangelical Quakers. And so they have pastors. So that like in Bolivia, all it's Quaker churches, and they have a Quaker seminary for that. And some fellow was trying to get an unprogrammed meeting started in La Paz, and they met great resistance to that from all the Quaker churches that were pastoral, if you will. And I'm drawing a blank. Fellow at friend's house who got very involved and was trying to help this fellow who was trying to start on program meetings.
The Blankfields?
Ralph Blankfield, yeah. And so I met the fellow. Ralph referred me to him when I went down to Bolivia. So it was more just a nice conversation. I see another George School classmate, a year older than I am, Bob Dockhorn here. So.
Well, if nobody else does, I have another question. When you were making the decision about whether or not to do ROTC, were you involved with the Quaker meeting at the time, and were they part of that decision?
Well, in the sense I was having to make the decision, started making in my senior year at George School, a Quaker school. Now, obviously, I didn't need to make the decision until the fall, but I mean, I was going through the process knowing that that's going to be on. I have to address that. Do I or do I not go into ROTC? Actually, I started in Air Force ROTC because they only had a 3-year commitment. That by the time I got to my junior year, they had changed it to a 4-year commitment. So I said, oh, I'm going to move over to Army ROTC. It's only 2 years.
And was there any conflict or friction over that decision in the Quaker context?
Well, I wasn't going to Quaker meeting very much. So I'd been at a Quaker school, but really in college, I really was not exposed to or interacting with Quakers in that fashion, though one of my classmates from George School, there were 5 of us that went to University of Virginia. At the same time was Henry Taylor, a well-known poet. So, but we didn't get into discussions typically. He was more interested in his poetry than to get into discussions about military service.
I was wondering, do you still feel bonds of affection for Venezuela and a sense of how the people who live there are coping with the disastrous conditions of their country in a spiritual way?
Oh yeah, they are, and we have our daughter Jenny was a AFS exchange student to Venezuela back in 1989, and we kept up with the family, and the son, who's Jenny's age, is a trained lawyer, and he has moved up to the States because he could not function down there, and he's helping a lot with immigration issues down in Miami area there. Yeah, I'd love to go back there, but it wouldn't be safe for me to go back, or I don't feel I would be safe. So I do interact. If I embarrass my wife sometimes if I hear somebody speaking English with a Hispanic accent. I'll say, "Oh, where are you from?" and I'm always curious to find out and talk about it, and I'll shift to Spanish if I'm talking to, they are. Janet is concerned that when I ask somebody that question, they think I'm an ICE agent. So I have to be careful with that. So, but it's really very bad situation, and certainly Venezuela in the 1950s had the largest middle class percentage-wise of any country in Spanish or South America or Central America. Today, it's far from that. They manage their oil resources very poorly in Venezuela, and there are Americans that still live there, but it's sad. Well, if something hits you later on after this, feel free to ask me, text me, or if you want to read a Bible in Spanish, I have it right here.
I heard you read the whole thing.
Read the whole thing in Spanish. Yeah.
I may have missed this, but what business did you go into then?
I went on, gosh, I went, became an accountant and worked a consulting side of a national consulting firm, and then came to work for the federal government and was in the federal government for 30 years. Financial management, both policy, managing accounting operations, and such as that.
Which secretary did you work under?
Well, for 5 years I worked for the Department of Transportation under the what is now called the Mass Transportation Administration when it was getting off the ground, and then more recently for the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission, which pacifist claim is NRC is pro-nuclear. The pro-nukes claim that NRC is anti-nuke. So draw your own conclusions as to what the Nuclear Regulatory Commission is all about. But I really was not involved with policy, nuclear policy directly, because I was involved with the financial management aspects of the organization.
Thank you.
The only you also went back down to Venezuela and worked there for the, actually I don't remember who you worked for, but you did the Venezuela report.
Oh, yes.
Is that like 82 or something like that?
1982. Yeah, somebody from the Institute for Public Administration found out that I'd lived in Venezuela and spoke Spanish fluently, and I was CPA to go and assess the financial systems of Venezuela. Well, I'd never written anything about financial management in Spanish, so I had to develop this 40, 50-page report in Spanish on what my findings were on this financial review, and that was a real challenge, getting the subtlety of words, how to say that, so that I wasn't offending people, but still pointing out issues there. And fortunately, I had someone who typed up the paper. It was a good editor.
If I heard you correctly, it sounds like there are a number of ways that you're volunteering now.
Right. Yeah, I'm probably a little bit more limited. I'm trying to get back. After being treasurer for 3 years, I've taken a break of the meeting, taken a break for a year or two. So I do want to get back in a little bit more involvement in the meeting.
I'm more referring to what you had said about offering assistance to those who are, for whom English is a second language.
Oh, well, I haven't gone into sort of a one-on-one tutoring kind of thing, but more groups where they know they're going to have people coming in whose English is not that proficient, and that's where I've, like the AARP tax aid program or the City of Rockville Board of Elections, that sort of thing.
And you're still active in those?
No, I'm no, on the AARP tax, I did it for 10 years. And when COVID came along, it got impossible to function in helping people prepare their tax returns. So Probably not doing too much and looking to see where I can. I need to be looking a little more.
Those sound like, you know, so important then and now, you know, to be helping people.
And because I do feel that people do have a hard time if they can't communicate easily in English, and they're expected to understand things that are in English.
Yeah, just a comment, I can't even imagine being plopped down in a country with no knowledge of the language and how hard that would be.
Well, I knew people that I grew up with, a lot of Americans. A lot of my friends in Venezuela were Americans. Some of them barely learned English. Like when in junior high school, we had 4 levels of Spanish. You had to take Spanish. In my English speaking junior high, I was in the most advanced level because I've gone to Spanish schools for earlier elementary. But there are people that had come in not knowing it. Well, what do you do if you've been hired? A dad, I'm being sexist here. A dad that had been hired as a geologist in Texas to come work in Venezuela, and he has a family, and he doesn't know any Spanish. Do you want a face to learn Spanish overnight? I could take that kind of job. And so that's the reason the oil companies got together and funded this English-speaking school. Went from K through 9th grade. And then a lot of people came up to the States after that. There was an English-speaking high school, a very small one, in Caracas.
Thanks for watching our video. For more content from Sandy Spring Friends Meeting, click to subscribe.